Today is the 8th of September and we are on the last chapter, Sacca Sangyutta. I come to Sutta 56.32. It's on page 1858. The Buddha said, "Monks, if anyone should speak thus, without having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of suffering as it really is, without having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the origin of suffering as it really is, without having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the cessation of suffering as it really is, without having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering as it really is, I will completely make an end to suffering. This is impossible. Just as monks, if someone should speak thus, having made a basket of acacia leaves, or of pine leaves, or of myrobalan leaves, I will bring water or a palm fruit. This would be impossible. So too, if anyone should speak thus, without having made the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths as they really are, I will make completely an end to suffering. This is impossible. But monks, if anyone should speak thus, having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of suffering as it really is, having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the origin of suffering as it really is, having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the cessation of suffering as it really is, having made the breakthrough to the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering as it really is, I will completely make an end to suffering. This is possible. Just as monks, if someone should speak thus, having made a basket of lotus leaves, or of kino leaves, or of maluva leaves, I will bring water or a palm fruit. This would be possible. So too, if anyone should speak thus, having made the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths, I will completely make an end to suffering. This is possible. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So in this sutta, it's very clear that there is no liberation from samsara without thoroughly understanding the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths are extremely important in the Buddha's teachings. The most important principles in the Buddha Dhamma concerns these Four Noble Truths. It's not like some of the Mahayana books say, and Four Noble Truths are primary school stuff. Now we come to 56.35. Monks, suppose there were a man with a lifespan of 100 years who could live 100 years. Someone would say to him, "Come, good man, in the morning they will strike you with 100 spears. At noon they will strike you with 100 spears. In the evening they will strike you with 100 spears. And you, good man, being struck day after day by 300 spears, will have a lifespan of 100 years, will live 100 years. Then, after 100 years have passed, you will make the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths, to which you had not broken through earlier. It is fitting, monks, for a clansman intent on his good to accept the offer. For what reason? Because this samsara is without discoverable beginning. The first point cannot be discerned of blows by spears, blows by swords, blows by axes. And even though this may be so, monks, I do not say that the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is accompanied by suffering or displeasure. Rather, the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is accompanied only by happiness and joy. But for the Noble Truth of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. At the end of the sutta. So here the Buddha is saying, suppose somebody were to make a bargain with you, would you like to be struck with 300 spears each day for your whole life of 100 years? But because of being struck by 300 spears each day, at the end of your life, you will understand thoroughly the Four Noble Truths and become liberated from samsara. And the Buddha says, if that is a bargain, you should quickly grab that offer because samsara is without a beginning and without an end. If we don't make an effort to get out of samsara, there will be no end to being stabbed by spears, by swords, by axes, and all that. So, unless we attain at least the first stage of Aryahood, then this King Yama, Yen-Lo Wong, is still waiting for us in hell, and we have to see him many, many times. So that's why the Buddha says, even if you were to be stabbed by 300 spears every day for 100 years, it's worth it if you can attain the understanding of the Four Noble Truths and get out of samsara. Otherwise, that suffering in samsara is endless. But then the Buddha says, actually, the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths is not accompanied by suffering. If we make the effort, we practice according to the Buddha's teachings and attain the jhanas, then every day we'll be experiencing happiness and joy. So, in which case, it's even a better offer by the Buddha. So, to practice the Noble Eightfold Path and get happiness in addition to getting out of samsara. The next sutta is 56.37. The Buddha said, monks, this is the forerunner and precursor of the rising of the sun, that is, the dawn. So too, monks, for a monk, this is the forerunner and precursor of the breakthrough to the Four Noble Truths as they really are, that is, right view. It is to be expected that a monk with right view will understand as it really is. This is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here the Buddha says that before you can understand the Four Noble Truths, you must have right view. And right view is stated in the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta 43. If you want to attain right view, it says there that there are two conditions. One is the voice of another. Another person must teach you the Dhamma. You don't learn the Dhamma on your own. You cannot understand the Dhamma just by meditating. Somebody else got to teach you the Dhamma. That's the first condition. The second condition is Yoniso Manasikara. You have proper attention or careful attention. So only two conditions. So that's why I always stress that right view is extremely important. When you come into the Dhamma, the first thing we must attain is right view. In other words, study the early suttas found in the Nikayas. And once you have right view, then you have started to understand the Four Noble Truths and you're on your way out of samsara. The next sutta is 56.39. It's an interesting as well as important sutta. Monks, those ascetics or Brahmins who do not understand as it really is, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They look up at the face of another ascetic or Brahmin, thinking, this worthy is surely one who really knows, who really sees. Suppose, monks, a tuft of cotton wool or kapok, light wafted by the wind, has settled on an even piece of ground. An easterly wind would drive it westward. A westerly wind would drive it eastward. A northerly wind would drive it southward. A southerly wind would drive it northward. For what reason? Because of the lightness of the tuft. So too, monks, those ascetics or Brahmins who do not understand as it really is, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They look up at the face of another ascetic or Brahmin, thinking, this worthy is surely one who really knows, who really sees. For what reason? Because they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. But monks, those ascetics or Brahmins who understand as it really is, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They do not look up at the face of another ascetic or Brahmin, thinking, this worthy is surely one who really knows, who really sees. Suppose, monks, there was an iron pillar or an Indra's pillar with a deep base, deep foundation, securely planted, immobile, unshaking. Even if a forceful blast of wind comes, whether from the east, the west, north, or the south, that pillar would not shake, quake, or tremble. For what reason? Because the pillar has a deep base and is securely planted. So too, monks, those ascetics or Brahmins who understand as it really is, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They do not look up at the face of another ascetic or Brahmin, thinking, this worthy is surely one who really knows, who really sees. For what reason? Because monks, they have clearly seen the Four Noble Truths. But four, the Noble Truth of suffering, the Noble Truth of the origin of suffering, the Noble Truth of the cessation of suffering, the Noble Truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So this sutta says that some people, when they don't understand the Dhamma, they are always looking for the right teacher. So they observe the monk and they think, wow, chong yim, mindful, all this. They forget that there's one sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. The Buddha says there are 4 types of containers. There's one container which is open and empty. There's one container which is open and full. There's another container which is closed and empty. There's another container that is closed and full. So it refers to the fact that there are some monks, they look very mindful and very impressive, but sometimes bo liao, mo liu, they don't understand the Dhamma. And sometimes you have one who is looks very impressive, mindful and all that, but he yao liu he knows the Dhamma. On the other hand, you have some monk who is not impressive at all. And sometimes this unimpressive monk does not understand the Dhamma. On the other hand, a monk can be very unimpressive, but he understands the Dhamma. So you look from the outside you cannot see, you cannot understand. You cannot know that person's heart, the mind. So looks are very deceiving. So don't look at the face of a monk and think, yao liu or mo liu. So that's why the Buddha says, don't depend on another monk. Depend on yourself and depend on the Buddha's Dhamma. Okay, 56.41. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. There the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, Monks, once in the past, a certain man set out from Rajagaha and went to the Sumagada lotus pond, thinking, I will reflect about the world. He then sat down on the bank of the Sumagada lotus pond, reflecting about the world. Then, monks, that man saw a 4-division army entering a lotus stalk on the bank of the pond. Having seen this, he thought, I must be mad, I must be insane. I've seen something that doesn't exist in the world. The man returned to the city and informed a great crowd of people, I must be mad, sirs, I must be insane. I've seen something that doesn't exist in the world. They said to him, but how is it, good man, that you are mad? How are you insane? And what have you seen that doesn't exist in the world? And he said, here, sirs, I left Rajagaha and approached the Sumagada lotus pond, thinking I will reflect about the world. I then sat down on the bank of the Sumagada lotus pond, reflecting about the world. Then I saw a 4-division army entering a lotus stalk on the bank of the pond. That's why I'm mad, that's why I'm insane, and that's what I've seen that doesn't exist in the world. And they said, surely you're mad, good man, surely you're insane, and what you have seen doesn't exist in the world. And the Buddha said, nevertheless, monks, what that man saw was actually real, not unreal. Once in the past, the Devas and the Asuras were arrayed for battle. In that battle, the Devas won, when the Asuras were defeated. In that defeat, the Asuras were frightened and entered the Asura city through the lotus top, to the bewilderment of the Devas. Therefore, monks, do not reflect about the world, thinking, the world is eternal, the world is not eternal, the world is finite, the world is infinite, the soul and the body are the same. The soul is one thing, the body is another. Or the Tathagata exists after death, or the Tathagata does not exist after death, or the Tathagata both exists and does not exist after death, or the Tathagata neither exists nor does not exist after death. For what reason? Because monks, this reflection is unbeneficial, irrelevant to the fundamentals of the holy life, and does not lead to revulsion, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. When you reflect, monks, you should reflect, this is suffering. You should reflect, this is the origin of suffering. You should reflect, this is the cessation of suffering. You should reflect, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. For what reason? Because monks, this reflection is beneficial, relevant to the fundamentals of the holy life, and leads to revulsion, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here the Buddha says, sometimes we might see what is very rare to see in the world, and we might think that we are mad. And also the Buddha says, don't be like this man, go to a corner and reflect about this world. And you reflect about this world, and then you have all kinds of views about the world. But the Buddha said, if you want to reflect, then you should reflect on the Four Noble Truths, because that is beneficial. If you reflect on other things, it is not beneficial. So this reflection can be said to be also contemplation as vipassana. So this vipassana, we should contemplate only on four things. Objects of vipassana are the body, feelings, the mind, and Dhamma. Others are not beneficial if you reflect on other things. The next sutta is quite important. 56.42. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Rajagaha on Mount Vulture Peak. Then the Blessed One addressed the monks thus, "Come, monks, let us go to Patibana Peak for the day's abiding." "Yes, Venerable Sir," those monks replied. Then the Blessed One, together with a number of monks, went to Patibana Peak. A certain monk saw the steep precipice of the Patibana Peak and said to the Blessed One, "That precipice is indeed steep, Venerable Sir. That precipice is extremely frightful. But is there, Venerable Sir, any other precipice steeper and more frightful than that one?" And the Buddha said, "There is, monk." "But what, Venerable Sir, is that precipice deeper and more frightful than that one?" And the Buddha said, "Those ascetics and Brahmins, monk, who do not understand as it really is, this is suffering. Who do not understand as it really is, this is the origin of suffering. Who do not understand as it really is, this is the cessation of suffering. Who do not understand as it really is, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They delight in volition that leads to birth, in volition that leads to aging, in volition that leads to death, in volition that leads to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. Delighting in volition, they generate volition that leads to birth, generate volitions that lead to aging, generate volitions that lead to death, generate volitions that lead to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. Having generated such volitions, they tumble down the precipice of birth, tumble down the precipice of aging, tumble down the precipice of death, tumble down the precipice of sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. They are not freed from birth, aging, and death, not freed from sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair, not freed from suffering, I say. But monks, those ascetics and Brahmins who understand as it really is, this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. They do not delight in volitions that lead to birth, nor in volitions that lead to aging, nor in volitions that lead to death, nor in volitions that lead to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. Not delighting in such volitions, they do not generate volitions that lead to birth, nor generate volitions that lead to aging, nor generate volitions that lead to death, nor generate volitions that lead to sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. Not having generated such volitions, they do not tumble down the precipice of birth, nor tumble down the precipice of aging, nor tumble down the precipice of death, nor tumble down the precipice of sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. They are free from birth, aging, and death, freed from sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair, freed from suffering, I say. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So here, the Buddha brought the monks up the hill, and when they saw this precipice, which is very steep, the monk said, this is extremely dangerous precipice. Because if you fall down this precipice, you will surely die. So it's extremely dangerous. So he asked the Buddha, is there any other precipice more dangerous? The Buddha said, yes. The precipice of samsara. We fall down the precipice of samsara. We don't die only once. We die many, many times, endless times. And even before each time we die, we suffer so much. So every lifetime we come, unless we are born in heaven, every lifetime we come, we suffer. Even as human beings, we suffer. And much worse, if you are reborn as a ghost, or as an animal, or in hell. So, this precipice of samsara is not something to play with. Don't take it lightly. It's only because we haven't seen how ghosts live that we take life lightly. If you have seen how ghosts live, or if you know about hell, then you won't take things so lightly. The next sutta is 56.45. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Vesali, in the great wood, in the hall with the peaked roof. Then in the morning, the Venerable Ananda dressed, and taking bowl and robe, entered Vesali for alms. The Venerable Ananda saw a number of Lichavi youths practicing archery in the training hall, shooting arrows from a distance through a very small keyhole, head through butt without missing. When he saw this, the thought occurred to him, these Lichavi youths are indeed trained. These Lichavi youths are indeed well trained in that they shoot arrows from a distance through a very small keyhole, head through butt without missing. Then when the Venerable Ananda had walked for alms in Vesali, and had returned from his alms round, after his meal he approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side, and reported what he had seen. The Blessed One said, what do you think, Ananda? Which is more difficult and challenging, to shoot arrows from a distance through a very small keyhole, head through butt without missing, or to pierce through the arrowhead, or to pierce with the arrowhead the tip of a hair split into 7 strands? And Venerable Ananda said, it is more difficult and challenging, Venerable Sir, pierce with the arrowhead the tip of a hair split into 7 strands. And the Buddha said, but Ananda, they pierce something even more difficult to pierce, who pierce as it really is. This is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, Ananda, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here the Buddha says, it is much more difficult to really understand the 4 Noble Truths than to shoot an arrow and split a hair into 7 strands. Why? Because understanding the 4 Noble Truths is to understand it at a shallow level is not so difficult. But to understand it thoroughly and become enlightened, that is difficult. Because you have to cultivate your mind until it's so sharp, totally rid of all the defilements, the 5 hindrances, which means attaining at least the 4 jhanas. And then after that, then only you can see the Dhamma so clearly and understand the 4 Noble Truths. Remember that we read in the earlier sutta, even the Sotapanna and the Sakkadagamin do not have joyous wisdom. And what's the other one? Swift wisdom. Anagamin and the Arahant has joyous wisdom and swift wisdom, meaning deep wisdom, which comes only with the fourth jhana. That's why it's not so easy to totally understand the Four Noble Truths. There's some people, they just recite Hu Chi Mie Tao and they think they understand the Four Noble Truths. That's really silly. That's what suffering, origin of suffering, cessation of suffering, and way leading to the cessation of suffering. They just repeat it like a parrot. The next sutta is 56.47. Now this is another famous sutta. Monks, suppose a man would throw a yoke with a single hole into the great ocean, and there was a blind turtle which would come to the surface once every 100 years. What do you think, monks? Would that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole? Stop here for a moment. This yoke is the piece of wood which the buffalo, the bullock, uses. This piece of wood is put around the neck of the bullock, the bull, and this bullock has to pull the cart, because this wood is placed around his neck. So when he moves, he pulls the cart. So this is the yoke. So this yoke, you throw into the ocean. The ocean is so huge, and it's floating on the ocean. And then you have a blind turtle at the bottom of the ocean. Only once in 100 years it comes up. What is the chance of it putting its head through the yoke? It's more difficult than winning the lotto, isn't it? And then a monk answered the Buddha, if it would ever do so, Venerable Sir, it would be only after a very long time. And then the Buddha said, sooner, I say, would that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole, then the fool who has gone once to the netherworld would regain the human state. For what reason? Because here, monks, there is no conduct guided by the Dhamma, no righteous conduct, no wholesome activity, no meritorious activity. Here, there prevails mutual devouring, the devouring of the weak. For what reason? Because monks, they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The Noble Truth of suffering, the Noble Truth of the origin of suffering, the Noble Truth of the cessation of suffering, the Noble Truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering, this is the origin of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here, actually what the Buddha means, I think, is that if a person does not understand the Dhamma and does not have right view, he has wrong view, that leads him to rebirth in the animal realm and the hell realm. And these two realms, once you go down to the animal realm and the hell realm, you'll be there for a very, very long time. So the Buddha says, the one who goes to the woeful plains of rebirth is a fool. Actually, when we have the human body and we don't make use of it and we waste our life, we are really a fool. Then when you lose the human body, then you want to recover the human body, it's very, very hard. That's why you see sometimes some people, they go into a trance and they invite the spirit into their body. The ghost will quickly come and enter their body. Some people think it's a deva or something, but most of the time it's the ghost, because the ghost is suffering in the ghost realm, and then he remembers, last time when I was a human being, life was so good. So you invite him to your body, quickly he'll come. And some of them also, they come because they realize that they did not do enough merit. That's why they are born in the ghost realm. So they want to have the chance to do merit, and they come into the human body. So this sutta is very striking, giving us a very strong warning that if we lead a foolish life, then we will find very difficult to get back this human form. And then the Buddha said, monks, suppose that this great earth had become one mass of water, and a man would throw a yoke with a single hole upon it. An easterly wind would drive it westward, a westerly wind would drive it eastward, a northerly wind would drive it southward, a southerly wind would drive it northward. There was a blind turtle who would come to the surface once every 100 years. What do you think, monks? Would that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole? It would be by chance, Venerable Sir, that blind turtle coming to the surface once every 100 years would insert its neck into that yoke with a single hole. So too, monks, it is by chance that one obtains the human state or the human body. It is by chance that a Tathagata, an Arhan, a perfectly enlightened one, arises in the world. It is by chance that the Dhamma Vinaya proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. You have obtained that human state, monks. Tathagata and Arhan Sammasambuddha has arisen in the world. The Dhamma Vinaya proclaimed by the Tathagata shines in the world. Therefore, monks, an exertion should be made to understand this is suffering. This is the origin of suffering. This is cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. So here is another warning by the Buddha that it's so difficult to obtain the human body. Now we have it. So difficult for an Arhan, Sammasambuddha, to arise in the world. Now we have it. So difficult for the Dhamma Vinaya to shine in the world. Now also, all the three perfect conditions we have. And if we don't make use of it, we are a real fool, and we have to suffer for being a fool. So, you just imagine, the Buddha came into this world, and now 2,500 years later, the Dhamma is still with us. How long it's going to last, we don't know. It's not going to last very long. Another few more thousand years, and it would have disappeared. And yet, this world, how long is this world? This earth, scientists say, is at least 5 billion years old. And 5 billion years old inside there, for a short period, the light of the Dhamma appears in the world, shines in the world, only for a short time. You don't grab the opportunity, then you'll be reborn in the darkness again. The ignorance of the Dhamma is a darkness. So this opportunity that has come to us is so rare, just like the turtle coming up once in 100 years to put its neck through that hole in the yoke. Such a rare opportunity. In a similar way, this rare chance we have already. The chance has come to us. Whether we make use of it or not is entirely up to us. So the Buddha says that's the difference between the wise man and the fool. We read in the earlier sutta. The wise man is the one who practices the holy path. The fool is the one who ignores the holy path.